Welcome to the Motherload, a parenting talk show with host Dr. Amy Stover, licensed psychologist, and Ann Brown, parenting educator. Each week, Amy and Ann invite parents just like you into the studio and discuss the trials of parenting. It's not your mother's parenting advice. And now, here's the Motherload.
Hi, I'm Amy.
And I'm Ann, and today we're going to talk about parenting teenagers. We've invited two moms of teens. I was going to call you two teen moms. Two moms of teens to come join us and talk about what it is that you wish you had known before, and what are you learning from that now in parenting your teenagers. So welcome.
Thank you. I know as a mom of an 8 and 10-year-old, I already have things I wish I would have known or done differently. And you've got 2 adult children.
And
right?
someone as old as you,
someone
certainly
who's
has regrets.
Close to their 60s, right? You've parented and raised 2 boys, right? They're in their 30s. What do you wish somebody would have said to you, or you could have done differently?
A do-over. That's that's what we will call. We will call today
the do-over.
The do-over. Mm-hmm. So, if I could, I think man, there is a long list. Regrets, I've had a few. I would say that one of the biggest things I wish I could have done differently is to remember that what I want to say is I want my kids, I wish my kids would have known that when they didn't get what they wanted, that was not only okay, but it's part of what happens in life. Because I think when my kids were teenagers and even as younger adults, I had to say to them a lot, that's just the way it is. Why would you expect that you'd find an apartment the first day you're looking?
Right.
Why would you expect that you're going to get all the classes you want in high school or in college? And I do wonder if when they were younger, that came from saying, you got to strive to get everything you want. Instead of kind of saying, sometimes you're not going to get your best.
Right.
Yeah.
Do your best and it'll probably work out just fine.
Exactly.
Right. So we have these 2 fabulous moms here today who have teenagers. Both of you have 2 teenagers and a teenager and a preteen, right? Yes. So you've had many years now of parenting. If you could go back and tell yourself, gosh, think about this or try this, even though you still have lots of parenting ahead of you, what do you
What's
wish?
your do-over?
Right. So what's your do-over, right?
Well, I know for me, I wish I wouldn't have kind of set up this perfect little community for them and kind of opened it more up to real life. I know that I spend a lot of time trying to find parents that parented like me or played in the sandbox the same way that my daughter would play in the sandbox. And I feel like kind of, instead of just letting her kind of figure it out, getting a little sand on her outfit.
Muck through it a little bit.
Exactly.
Sure.
That's where the learning happens. Right. And that's what I realize now.
That's so interesting because I think certainly in the early years, preschool and kindergarten years, as teachers, we kind of say, who should we set up a play date with? Who's kind of like this kid? And what you're saying, Jasmine, is so interesting because maybe we also need to say, who is unlike this child?
Right.
So they can really kind of learn that emotional intelligence idea of how do you be with somebody different. That is such a good point, and I think that we do that our whole kids' lives.
Not just who would be complimentary, but who would open up my kid's world a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it translates now as that she's a teenager. That's what I'm finding. The people that she's hanging out with are different. There's so many different elementary schools being pulled into these middle schools. And I'm amazed at her coping skills.
Right.
It just kind of letting her have that freedom to kind of figure it out on her own.
Right.
Our kids really are a lot more capable than we give them credit for. And I think, when they're younger, I know that I definitely felt like that I should protect their world. But actually getting some, bumps and bruises along the way helps them realize who they are and helps us realize who they are. Yeah, that's a great point.
Hillary, do you have a do-over?
I think for me it's listening more and talking less because I think when you get into the teen years, kids will tell you things in subtle messages and you really have to be open to hearing that. Whether it's the grades they're getting, if they're getting 14 out of 15 on a quiz, like does it matter in life? I mean, if they're who they're hanging out with, and so I think really listening to kids and practicing that when they're young is really important. And if I had to do it, I would do a lot more of that.
Right.
And just myself.
You know, it's funny because I run groups with teenagers when it's just me and them in the room, and that's the number one thing they tell me. When I ask them, what do you want from your parents? What do you wish they would do differently? If you had a magic wand, what would you do to the adults in your life? And 9 times out of 10, they tell me, I just wish they would be quiet and just listen to me. And I think that what they also mean in that, but maybe can't articulate, is listen to me and not judge. Or freak out, right? I mean, when your boys say, you know, well, I'm hanging out with so-and-so, and you're like, and you get a little bit worried about that, to just really go, tell me more.
Right. Yeah. I think there's also an element that it's not just about freaking out. I'm really hearing what you're saying. I'm really listening rather than talking, although now I'm talking. That it's also, for me, there was this need to fill in whatever my kids told me with instructional advice for their own good.
Right.
That, so if they would say, I'm struggling with something, instead of just hearing it and validating it, it would be, okay, so here's what we do. And I get out the clipboard.
Right.
It's like, you know, and it even happens with young kids, even in grade school. You know, your kid says, I wasn't invited to the birthday party. And you're like, well, were you picking your nose again? You know, or did you do that stupid face that you always do? And trying to fix it rather than just kind of hearing a struggle. So I think that probably if my kids were here, and they would rather pour hot tar up their noses than probably be on this parenting show with their mother, what they would say is, let me just be imperfect. And don't have advice for me. Just let me
there's
struggle.
this catchphase, right, of using these teachable moments all the time, when really our kids would rather we shove that, right? And just have a moment, not a teachable moment, but just a moment to listen for a bit.
And especially as a teenager, I try to think about when I was a teenager, and I'm interested what you guys say, if someone had ever said to you, you know, I'm telling you this for your own advice, did you listen? I think that we just get defensive when that happens. Did you hear any advice as a teenager that was told this is for your own good, and you really listened? I think generally we don't listen.
Right. Or you throw up a wall of defense because you feel like you're judging me. Right. Teenagers feel judged a lot.
Everybody feels judged. You know, I love my mom. She's 90, and she's going to be watching this. And I would have to say that when she talks to me, and she's not judgmental at all, but there still is a little alarm that goes off as like, is this going to be about something I should be doing differently with my kids or with me, that we all kind of stop listening when we think somebody is giving us advice for our own good.
Because I think you're right. I mean, I think that kids and they're natural pleasers. We want to please our parents. We want to do the right thing. And we need to hear, and they need to feel validated that we're kind of letting them, you know, do their own little struggles, or just letting them talk and be heard, because, you know, I mean...
Well, and that we make mistakes too, right?
Exactly.
That when we're looking at them or the situation that they're in, we may have been in it before, we may not have, but we may have screwed it up too. And I think kids learn more from our mistakes than they learn from our successes and everything we do well. Right?
Absolutely.
At the dinner table when we're talking.
One of the exercises we do in my class is make a mistake in front of your kids this week
and talk
about
it.
Process. Just go, man, I blew it. Kids eat that up. And I think teenagers especially need to learn from stories of people who have gone before them and have lived through it. And so if you tell a story about a time you blew it or you were embarrassed, they just can't get enough of that.
Yeah, I say the same thing. When you're at the dinner table and you're talking as a family, talk about the mistakes you made when you were their age. First of all, they think it's hilarious, right?
So
to make
here's
fun
what
of.
I hear. You have a PhD, and I have a degree in music, and we both give the same advice. So I think what we've learned today is graduate school is expensive, and maybe you don't need to do it.
Well, or I just come up with lots of stories about how my husband has messed up. That's really my go-to.
No, you know what I noticed the difference between us? I say things all the time about, well, there was a study done at Princeton, and whereas you've actually read the study. I always allude to a study, and then I love it when later you say,
It's just a stamp
you
for
bring
us,
up that
right?
other study.
Yes,
it's like, oh my God, it really
that was
existed.
it. That was the study.
I didn't make up that
right.
study.
We're legit, right? So here's the thing. I think every generation looks at parenting, right? And they go, oh, well, parenting kids is harder today than it was 20 years ago because of X, Y, or Z. But really, when you're parenting teens today, what's the hard part about parenting teens today for the two of you?
Well, I think kind of in line with what you guys were just saying is it's almost learning another language of how to parent. You can't really directly teach them anymore after a certain point. You're more guiding their decisions on the road to independence.
Right.
And that's just a big transition mindset, I think, as a mom.
You know, I have to tell a funny story about that. I scared the pants off of a parent the other day in my office because I said just that to them.
Yeah.
They were talking about how they can't tell their teenager to do anything. And I said, because you're kind of done parenting, right? I mean, the direct parenting of like, you know, button your pants and chew with your mouth closed and all those things is done at that point. That really, parenting teenagers is about modeling and being open to discussion, and you know that's a lot tougher job when it gets to that stage than other areas of parenting.
So what scared the parent?
That they felt like they were. I think they thought, yeah, I'm done. What do you mean I'm done? I'm not done. They're only 13. I've got 5 more years at home, and I was like, not done altogether, but done with direct instruction, right? You've kind of turned the page. You have to learn a new language. I love that phrase, Jasmine. You have to learn a new language, a new way of listening, a new way of talking. Yeah.
You know, I think that maybe that also holds true when kids are younger than teenagers. I think that in general, when we talk to kids in an instructional way, we are not getting through in the same way we do when we leave it open-ended. And we say, so what could be a way you can work this out? I know I really relate to what you're saying, because for me, what I wanted to say to my kids when they were teenagers is, I'm a parenting instructor. So if you're going to listen to anybody...
I'm waiting for that day.
I know I'm doing it right.
Why would you listen to Dad? He's an electrician. Like, Dad doesn't know what he's talking about.
That's what I tell my husband all the time.
I used to say to Robin,
I get
too.
it.
Right. I used to, my favorite thing to Robin, so which one of us is the electrician and which one is the parenting instructor? But
our kids don't want to hear that either.
No,
right?
in
to
fact,
be directed.
one of my children, who I will not name, when he was about 7, I was giving him some awesome advice. And he said to me, is this the advice you give your clients? Because it really sucks. That was a nice moment.
Nothing more humbling.
That was a proud moment for me. But I think it's the impulse coming from it is we honestly do feel like we know better. We really have lived it. We really can give them something they need, but that's not a gift they want. That's just...
They'll let you
us.
know.
That's
certainly.
right.
What about you, Hillary? What do you think is something tough about parenting teens today?
Oh, gosh. I think, as parents, it's hard to watch your kids want to fail, right?
Aw.
And just letting that happen, right? That's tough, right?
Yeah.
And, we're all human. We all do fail. But I think, like you said, even when they're young, you want to fix it. When they're teenagers, you kind of want to fix it. But as Jazz said, you can't really do that anymore. Right. You have to guide. You got to let them fail and make their mistakes, because that's the only way they're going to, when they get into college, you're not going to be there, right? When they get their first job, you're not going to be there. So I think, letting your kids fail, but in a way that you're compassionate to their failures.
And society doesn't help you with that now, right?
No.
Because every single thing your child participates in, they get a participation ribbon, they get an award, they get a trophy, and so they don't really, nobody's saying to kids anymore, you're just really not that good at this.
Right.
Right. Try a different sport because you kind of suck at that, right? Every child feels good all the time about everything they do. And so they haven't experienced a ton of failure by the time they're 13 or 14 years old.
And there was a study done. I mean, there really was.
I'll let you know if there was a study done for real.
There was a study done that talked about the one predictor of success is past failures. That if you really want to know how you're going to succeed, you have to experience failure, and you have to know that it's not the end. That failure means you just start again. I think that's a great thing to think about, Hillary, and failing in front of our kids, telling our stories to them about when it hasn't worked out, because that gives us hope.
Right. The real study that I think was related to that was about raising children who are problem solvers, which I think is related to failure.
I'm talking about, it was on Facebook.
Oh, okay. Well,
When I found out that my inner dog is a beagle.
There was another study that was in a published journal that said, and I think it's related to the failure piece, right? Really what we want is to raise a generation of people who, when they're faced with an obstacle, they can solve problems. And if they've never failed, they don't know how to get out of that, right? How do I make something better about this? Or how do I just muck through this and know that it's going to turn out okay?
Right.
And by the time we become adults, there's actually this really cool social psychology experiment where they put a bunch of blocks in front of adults and they say, construct a tower. And they do this with a team of adults. And the adults take the first 5 minutes figuring out a plan because they think that it has to be just right. Kids who are under the age of 10, guess what they do? They just start doing. They just start doing because they're not afraid of messing it up.
Right.
And so I think if we create those types of experiences with our kids where it's just okay to mess up and just start again, we'll do them more favors.
And when I think back to teenage years, for me, it was one mess up after another. It was one awkward feeling after another. It was one regret. I wish I could have done it differently. And so how wonderful to have that as the model of, you're a teenager. That's why it feels that way. Well, I was going to talk more about me, but we're brought our guests.
I like hearing about you.
So when we talk about stress, that we know that kids are stressed, even though we often think to ourselves, oh my God, what do they have to be stressed about? I remember my image of my parents when I was a kid is that it was very wonderful and glamorous to be a parent. I remember my parents went out on the weekends and my mom it was the 60s, and my mom put on this long fake black ponytail that, she put like way up here on her head and big earrings. And I thought, how wonderful to be a grown-up. I'm pretty sure that my kids never looked at me when they were growing up thinking, how awesome to be a grown-up.
You know what most kids think now, actually? If you survey kids today on what they think parenting is about, they'll say, over 80% of them will say, parents are stressed. Being a mommy or a daddy means being stressed.
That's depressing.
And that's sad, right?
Yeah, I think there was a study also done in my own head when I made it up just now while you were talking. There was some empirical evidence that I bet that if you ask little kids, preschoolers, what do they hear their moms say most, it will be hurry up.
Oh, hurry up.
And so and that to me just explains what life must be like. And I wonder if you're teenagers, if we said to them, so if we kind of went through it, what do you hear most from your mom? It probably would be something instructional rather than this is hard, I'm validating or whatever. That
you're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. Right.
And do we live a life as adults that would make a teenager want to be an adult? Right. Do our lives look that way?
If you, and I know this is putting the two of you on the spot, if you had to think of something that you wish or you hope your kids were hearing from you as teenagers, instead of hurry up or, you're not doing that right, or what's your grade card look like, or what do you hope that your kids know or hear from you as a parent?
I think just that I love them unconditionally, even when she doesn't do something right. In the end, I'm not going to worry about that 8th grade math paper that she bombed because she fooled around on her horse a little too long at Big Dog last week. I think just that, it's going to be okay. Pick yourself up, and it's going to be a better day tomorrow.
Which is hard because I think, especially when kids become teens, we're starting to always in our head juxtapose that with, am I teaching my kid stick-to-itiveness? And am I teaching my kid, do your best? I mean, do your best, what does that mean? And I think that it's so important to remember that only hearing do your best, do your best, do your best is really stressful.
Well, and I think the other thing we're laying on teenagers in 9th grade and 8th grade is where they're going to go to college already. Do you know how many parents come to my, so both of you relate to that. Parents come to my office with freshmen and they're already planning for what college they're going to get into and talking, and that's a lot.
Middle school counselors.
Dr. Stober, speaking of college, why don't you share the story of my college degree?
Oh gosh.
With this is unscripted, but when you said college.
So I had a client in my office who will remain
my favorite Amy story.
Unnamed, who said that their child was going to get a degree in ethnomusicology. And I said, no, they can't get a degree in ethnomusicology. It doesn't exist. And the mom was like, you could see her anxiety raising. And she said, that's my point. Like, yes, it does exist, and my child wants to major in it. And I said, but it's not a real major. And I'm thinking about Anne, who has said...
My degree is in ethnomusicology. I got it from UC Santa Cruz in 1970. And I have known Amy for 13 years, and I've always said, my degree is in ethnomusicology.
And I thought she was
I was
kidding.
Making it up.
I thought you were kidding. I thought for sure.
Oh, just admit you
it
didn't
was
go to
made
college.
Up. Right. So when I have this poor mom sitting in front of me with all of her anxiety about what her teenager is going to do for a living, I actually increased her fears.
And look where I wound up, sitting next to Amy Stober, PhD.
So then I had to go back and say to Anne, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's a real
Is that a
degree.
Facebook
Right.
moment? I think I read that on Facebook.
Yes, right,
Yes.
right.
But it is part of this idea with college too, that it's all trickle down, that if you're worried about college, and there's a reason, we can't feel aberrant because we worry about, will our kids go to college? We all feel that, but it's how do we not put that into everything that they do?
Well, and how do we carry some of it so they don't have to carry all of it?
Right.
And when do we be quiet about it, perhaps, when we have our own fears and worries?
Right. So you were not asked, I butted in before
Right.
you were
Oh, sorry.
asked the same question. I don't remember what it is.
What was it?
What was the question?
If you had to think about what you would like your kids to hear, not a hurry up or a, right? Jasmine's talking about unconditional love, so sorry about that's taken.
I know, she takes the good one.
Because two parents cannot love a child, only one parent.
Anything else you wish your kids would know?
Kind of what my son is 10, but my daughter's 13. I think what I ask my son when he plays sports right now, and I remind myself, are you having fun?
Oh,
I think it's really important. Are you having
I
fun?
don't think
Because
I ever asked my kids that.
we start sports early. We
Gotta
start.
call my kid. Excuse me, I gotta make a phone call.
Are you having fun today? I think it's just, are you having fun, right? Because I'm having fun watching you, right? Are you enjoying this? And, with my daughter, who already puts, you got to know your own kids, right? But my daughter who already puts pressure on herself to get good grades, it's okay if you don't get 100% all the time, right? Are you?
Right.
Did you learn something? And did you enjoy your classmates? Did you have a giggle during class? Whatever, just take a deep breath, right? I wish I would have been told that more as a kid. Take a deep breath sometimes and just let it out.
Right.
Because it's really, it is a stressful time in their lives, much more I think than ours.
Yeah,
as
well,
teenagers.
we all agree that we want our kids to be comfortable with who they are. But what we don't really agree on within ourselves is how do we get them there?
Yeah.
Because, for me, there's always, even as you were talking, I so agree with you. And yet I know that there's a part of me that would have been, that was and is really hard to resist against saying, but if you would get an A, then you can get into AP and that's going to make your life easier. And it's finding that balance between what we want for our kids and what we know and giving our kids an opportunity to decide for themselves.
Well, and do we model doing something just because it's fun?
Exactly.
Like, as you said that, I was trying to think to myself, other than this show, which I really love, what am I doing that's fun just for me?
Right.
That when I leave the house and my kids are like, Mommy, where are you going? That I can say, I'm just going to go do this because I want to. Or
Did you have an answer for that?
well, yeah, there are things that I do for myself. Mostly it's hanging out with friends.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to be able to say to our kids, I'm doing this just to go have fun, right? And be an independent
that's
person,
good.
right?
Yeah.
Right. And being able to say, I know for me this was a really hard thing. I'm not going to do that for you, even though I can, but I'm choosing not to do it now. That we have to take care of ourselves as well. Right. I think we've come to the end of our time. We want to thank you guys. It's, we so appreciate you coming on and talking about your kids and talking about the struggles, because I really believe for everything that any one of us says out loud, there's like 1 billion people who are thinking, oh my God, I feel the same way.
Well, and we couldn't have come up with 2 more wonderful messages to take away today, right? If we really want something for our kids to hear, it's, I love you no matter what, even with all your mess ups, and did you have fun today? So
Right, and everyone needs to go out and fail in front of their kids. And talk.
mess up today. Somebody mess up today.
You can find us on Facebook at the Motherload.
Not your mother's parenting advice.
The Motherload, not your mother's parenting advice. Because if you only do the Motherload, it will give you something that's not us. I just need to tell you, it's not us. We also want to thank our sponsor, Pioneer Pediatrics. And we want to remind you, don't parent like my co-host.
The Motherload has been brought to you today by the following sponsors: